Alright guys, welcome back. We're going to jump right into this video. As you guys already know, we went ahead and finished up the brake fluid flush on the EcoBeast. All that nasty old brake fluid is in here. So now, since we already have access to the front wheel calipers, we're going to go ahead and change out the brake pads because it is now time to do so. So I went ahead and got just a set of ceramic brake pads from AutoZone. The backs were good, so I didn't have to do those, so just the fronts today. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, first things first, we'll go ahead and take off right here the caliper itself. We're just going to take off the top portion here, and it's a 13 millimeter that you'll take these guys off with. So go ahead and grab them and loosen them up. So now that you got those removed, go ahead and start wiggling it off. It'll come right off. Your brake pads will probably stay on the rotor itself just like that. So this is not hanging on the brake line itself. Get yourself a pair of zip ties, simple as that. And what I do is I'll just tie this up top to the suspension itself, or maybe the upper control arm, so that the weight is being held up with these guys. And once you guys have that off, your brake pads will easily slide out just like that. There's the back one, and over here, here's the front one, just like that. So then once you have those off and out of the way, you'll take out the little slide pins here. They have a little rubber boot on them. So you'll pop that boot over the edge, slide it out. That comes out real easy. So do that to both the top and the bottom one. You'll have your little shims inside here, inside the little groove of the main portion of the brake caliper. You're going to pop those off because if you got the gold Duralast brakes, you get that in your kit. So I'm going to go ahead and get this off. If you can't do it by hand, which I cannot, get you a little flathead screwdriver or something to pry them up and off. Just like that. So I went ahead and made a last second audible real quick. I wanted to take off the entire brake bracket, which holds the brake caliper in place. What you simply need is just a 21 millimeter, which will take off these larger bolts, which there's one here and one here. It is pretty tight, so get you like a breaker bar. But yeah, 21 millimeter, break it loose, then you can just use a handheld ratchet. Because I wanted to actually take a look at the caliper itself, get a good all-around look at it, see the condition of it, get a little measurement on it, and just kind of give myself the peace of mind that I like. And to take off your brake rotor, because it'll be probably just a little bit seized onto the hub itself, I just get myself a little mallet, give it a good couple whacks in the back, and it should pop off. And just like I suspected, the hub itself, it's got some rust buildup on it just from the time and water and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit this with a little grinder here, or a little brush here. This is a steel brush. Get most of this rust off of both locations. Then I'll apply a little anti-seize just so we can get it off easier next time. You don't have to do this, but just if you want that peace of mind, you can. So that's what I'm gonna do. So what I went ahead and did was I just measured the thickness of this rotor, which it measured out to about 35 millimeters, and the minimum thickness for this guy before you have to replace them is 32 millimeters. So we're good. And one thing I did real quick, just so it's easier to come off the next time, I just lined the inside mating surface between the hub and the rotor with a little bit of anti-seize. You don't have to do this once again, but I do recommend you would. Now go ahead and put this back on, and we'll get ready to reassemble the brake components. Alright, so turning our attention to building back up these brakes, what I did was I just wire brushed these internal spots right here, which is where the little shims will lie. Got the new shims over here in the bag, and these guys are simply going to be placed like this. So the little tab that has the curve on it, which hopefully you guys can see there, that is always going to face outside. So keep in mind the brake pads will be squeezing on the inside with that larger tab on the outside, and you'll be good to go. So what you're going to want to do first is take some brake grease and lube up the parts you need. So the back side of these shims is what you're going to be aiming for, and then as well as on the inside of the shim you'll do the same. So you don't need too much, and make sure you keep it on the actual shim itself and it's not overlapping or overflowing, because you don't want it to get onto the brake pad or the brake surface on the rotor. So yeah, just little by little, just kind of put a little bit in there. And once you have your little shims back in place, the new ones at least, it's time to go ahead and put this bracket back on. Keep in mind the orientation. You want your little slide pins to be facing towards the inside of the truck, and this guy here, this mating surface will be actually on the inside over here of the knuckle on the truck. So you just want to make sure you get that in there nice and correct. When you're putting your new bolts back in, I applied a little bit of Loctite on there, some blue Loctite. You want to do that because you don't want these to loosen up over all the vibrations of driving around. So just put a little bit of that on there and go ahead and screw them in. And then once you have those nice and snug down, go ahead and torque them. They're going to be torqued to 135 foot-pounds. Yes, that sounds like a lot, but these are big bolts and they hold a lot of pressure when it comes to the brake system. So don't worry, that'll be good to go. So 135. There's one. And there's two. Next up, you're going to want to go ahead and get your new brake pads out. As you can see, these are both here. You're going to want to make sure you put the correct one in the correct spot. So if you can see here, this one here has two little ears on it, if you want to call those, and this one does not. So the one with the ears, or those humps, will actually be on the back side or on the inside, which is closest to the frame of the truck. And the ones that don't have ears, they're going to go on the outside, or the one that faces away towards the wheel. Make sure you push them all the way together so they're making contact with the rotor. So then what you're going to want to do before we put over the top part that clamps on and has the pistons on these brake pads, you're going to want to apply a little bit of grease to those contacting surfaces where it's going to connect to the pistons on the back side and then the edge of that caliper on the outside, just so there's a nice smooth connection there. So go ahead and apply a little bit of grease. Next up, what you want to do is going to go ahead and take your little slide pins or your guide pins. You'll remove the rubber boot, just kind of pop it off the top, slide it off, and you want to clean the inside of that rubber boot as well as the actual shaft of the guide pin itself. Use a little bit of brake clean and then wipe it off with a shop towel. Once you guys have those little guide rods cleaned up, all nice and shiny, and then as well as the inside of the little rubber boots nice and clean, you're going to go ahead and apply a little layer of that same brake grease to the shaft, and then go ahead and put the boot back on, and we'll slide that back into these ports here. Alright, so before we can actually get this guy to fit over these new brake pads here, we're going to actually have to push back the pistons just a little bit. So you can get this little tool here from AutoZone or any auto store, to be honest. And this is what helps you push those pistons back in just a little bit so you can fit this over the top. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. Push these back just slightly, and then we'll get this guy installed. Yep, there you go. Fits in there nice and tight. Alright. Now that we got that there, go ahead and line it up here so we can fit on the guide pin bolts, which are these little ones here. Go ahead and snug them down real quick. So now we can go ahead and get these guys torqued down. These ones are torqued to 55 foot-pounds, and we'll be good to go here. And with that, guys, that's exactly all you'll need to do to change out your front brake pads. I'm gonna go ahead and jump on the other side, do the identical process of what we did here, and then last but not least, we'll then put on the wheel and tire. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, once you do this exact thing on the other side, you have successfully changed out your front brake pads on your 2009 to 2014 F-150. And if you followed me from the previous video to this one, you've also actually flushed out your brake fluid with nice, crisp, clean brake fluid, and you're good to go probably for another almost 100,000 miles. But just like that, we're going to call this video done for this Eco Beast today. Make sure you stay tuned, subscribe, and thank you for watching Everything Apron.